Hola, ¿qué tal? ¿Cómo están? Muy buenas tardes y bienvenidos.
Good afternoon. How is everyone? Welcome back to the last day of Virtual Outsourced to LAC Week 2020. It's our last day, and this is our closing session. We're going to end with a bang, and I'll tell you a little bit more about our session today. For 9 years, Outsourced to LAC offers a space for global digital goods and services companies where they have the opportunity to learn directly from companies that are innovating in these sectors at the regional and the global level. Over the last 8 days, we've had top-tier speakers with us who talked to us about online education. We had a very practical session on e-commerce, and we had a very interesting presentation on COVID. We talked about prop tech. Not too long ago, we talked about cybersecurity, video games, and so on, a whole variety of issues that I think left us with a lot of food for thought. I hope you've enjoyed these webinars as much as we have. And if for any reason you weren't able to attend live, please go to outsourcetolac.com so you can watch videos which will be available until the end of next month. It's a true honor to introduce to you today the speakers for this workshop, 5 important tools for organizations going through a digital transformation. From Cisco, we have Pedro Suarez, leader go-to-market for Cisco Latin America, and Pablo Marron, manager for practice and collaboration at Cisco.
We invite you to locate the interpretation button at the bottom of your window.
We invite you to share your questions via chat. Our moderators will be interacting with our audience via the chat function. So once the session is over, I'd ask you to stay with us for a few more minutes because we have a very special presentation to bring this event to a close. Pablo, Pedro, thank you very much for being with us today, and you have the floor. Thank you, Itzel. It's such a pleasure for us to be here with you this afternoon as a part of this event. It's a privilege to have this opportunity to bring things to a close. It's been such an interesting series of sessions that you have put on throughout O2LAC. We represent Cisco here. As Itzel said, not too long ago, I'm Pedro Suarez, and I deal with go-to-market, how to take messages about our solutions to market. We have with us Pablo Marron, who will present right now. Thank you. Good afternoon, everyone. Colombia, Costa Rica, good afternoon, my beloved Buenos Aires. Thank you, everyone who's with us today. It's such a pleasure, and it's a pleasure for you to have us bring this fantastic event to a close. As Pedro said during his introduction, we've been working together for quite a while in different roles, sometimes similar, and just recently we've been working very closely together, helping organizations during, it might not be politically correct, but I might call it a forced transformation. The pandemic brought us here. Sometimes we really have been talking about what have we learned the most. It's day 120 of quarantine for a lot of us. So what have we learned? If we had to say it in a nutshell, and that's where this session comes from, we want to share with you 5 points. We have 5 tools, 5 lessons learned that are crucial for organizations going through a transformation. And Pablo, what we're going to talk about today, and I'd like to really highlight this, is that we're talking about things with a real life impact. We've seen them in a lot of organizations. A lot of organizations have overcome challenges, not only external factors, but we want to think about being prepared. Because today it's COVID, but we've been in other situations. Previously, there have been hurricanes, earthquakes, and there will always be events that are going to test us as human beings, as organizations, whatever we may be doing. So I've been discussing all of these phenomena. When a storm comes, we feel very anxious. We might feel afraid. Pedro, there's uncertainty. I'm going to interrupt you. Before we talk about our feelings, maybe we can ask the audience. Sure. Hector David, how many of you feel like you're in crisis? We're all undergoing a transition right now, but who feels like they're going through a crisis? Because that's what we're going to start with. Talk about it, discuss in the chat, in the Q&A. And Pedro, this is what you were saying. We meet with clients every day, and a lot of the conversations, I think everyone, someone wrote everyone in all caps. I'm asking you this because there are drivers that drive the progress of humankind. One of those is fear of the unknown, and the other is inspiration, the inspiration to do things differently and to improve. So please write in the chat. Let us know if what is driving you the most right now is fear or if it's energy to make a change. It's really interesting. We're getting a ton of responses. There's fear when it comes to investment. Another one says, I feel challenged, but not in crisis. Right. Uncertainty, a fantastic opportunity for the future. And the idea is to create new things, of course. And that's what we want to talk about, because real life is reflected in these answers. Well, when it comes to, are you going to talk about the stages of change? Sure, that's where we're going. A lot of the people we meet with, and I agree with that answer, people say my business model collapsed. I haven't invoiced a cent in 4 months. I think that'll resonate with a lot of you. In a conference like this, a person from an SME in Argentina wrote me the other day and said, I run ski centers. There's all kinds of snow. It's fantastic, but my business is closed. So what do I do now? So clearly, there are situations that make you say, hey, is this transition bad? This is bad. Everything I've built for so long is at risk. So I also want to tell you, and we've heard stories from the other side. Some people are saying, I discovered something new. And we were talking with the organizers of the event right before the session, and we were talking about what the next event will be like. What have we discovered based on this experience? In a lot of cases, new business models will be created. So I'll keep reading messages. Energy, you still need to produce, as someone. I was talking to the owner of a restaurant chain who said, Pablo, we used to be completely physical. And when this started, I felt like I was going to die, but now I've discovered e-commerce. So this is the new trend for businesses. Right. I'd like to share an example with you, Pablo, for the entire audience, because this is an example like the one you brought up. We're talking about learning when it comes to external factors that we can't control. It might be COVID today, a hurricane tomorrow, an earthquake, any kind of threat. The key, and this is one of the lessons, one of the best practices we have to share, is preparation. We're talking about a company in Mexico, in Monterrey, in the health sector called Well Medic. And what happened in their case? They started to digitize because of competition, to better face competition, because they wanted to change and improve their business model. And so they were thinking and looking for alternatives to become more modern in that regard. A while ago, then the whole pandemic occurs, and they had made some headway. They were advanced in some areas, but they had an excellent idea. And their idea was to create an app for queries where people could answer a questionnaire and enter information about their possible symptoms or if they were possibly exposed to the virus. This application, which has AI and machine learning, inside gives them a score or a risk of infection. And then it automatically schedules an appointment with a doctor from WellMedic. It schedules the appointment when the time comes. There's a virtual session that takes place. It's a remote appointment between that person and the doctor. So just guess what happened over the last 3 months? There have been 20,000 virtual queries at WellMedic over 3 months. And that was business that didn't exist. It did not exist. And they grew to 20,000. And that's what we're hearing now. They're talking about tourism and construction in the comments, to 20,000. And they answered 3 million people who asked them questions in the app. Just with these 20,000 people, that meant 400% growth over the previous year. So that was in the context of setting themselves apart, dealing with the competition. Just imagine everything they learned over receiving 3 million queries. And they didn't go to anyone, the patients came to them. So the possibilities are incredible, they're endless. We have a question from Maxine. We're going to cover that over the next few slides. We're going to talk about specific examples about how we can help businesses. We'll talk about technology for any business. Some people say technology is only for large companies. Someone here said something, and I thought that was a great message, which I really appreciate. I appreciate this person sharing something more personal. Thanks to this situation and the fact that I'm unemployed now, I'm a pioneer for an internet business. So thank you for sharing something about your situation. That also inspires all of us. And we're seeing a lot of cases like yours. And these interactions are all fantastic. But we know that our brains are meant for multitasking. This is if we're in a 40-minute long webinar, we need to do something else to satisfy the urgent need. There's the link on each slide so that you can multitask. If you're multitask and hit the link below right now, you'll see a report that was published today. This is a scoop just for the 350 people who are in the room right now. The link is down below. That's hot off the presses information from today about the evolution of work pre-COVID and post-COVID, so you can take a look at that. You'll have the content, so of course, obviously. Thank you, Pablo, for sharing that, because that is firsthand information about the pandemic. And just to segue as far as what we want to say next, I'd like to touch upon what one of the attendees said. Tourism has been the industry that has been the most battered by the pandemic. As a tourist, I can say, yes, definitely. My lifestyle hit me hard. I'd like to talk about what a friend of mine is doing. He's a tourism services provider, and we were talking. He said, Pablo, I don't know what I'm going to do. He transformed all of his knowledge. Now he has a series of podcasts. He's creating videos, and he now holds conferences. So he transformed all of his knowledge to keep his market active. All of us who used his product, he's getting to us in different ways to make the customer more faithful, and so that we don't lose the motivation to be ready, because we need to transcend the crisis and then rethink everything, do something new, and then keep going forward. Pablo, one thing that is very important is that it's affecting all of us. Every single person on the planet is sharing similar concerns. It doesn't matter what your occupation is, your gender, your age. This is affecting everyone, and that's why it's important for us to go back and talk about how to respond to all of this, How can we make sure that everything we do is done in order to improve and improve those around us in this situation? Exactly. During this transition to something new, what we want to do now is talk about what do we think about the last 4 months? What image comes to mind? Take 15 minutes and see if an image pops to mind that represents the last 4 months. Some people might say, how am I supposed to remember the 120 days, 200 days of the pandemic? What am I going to remember? So take a few seconds to think about that. Is this it? Do you agree or not? Who is that? We think this is the image, the face of the pandemic. But what does it represent? Who is it? Who do you think this person is? What's happening there? What's happening in this scenario? Working, yes. Who are you looking at? One of my agents? Call center? Right. That's great. So look, am I using a headset just on one ear? The headset for the contact center is a pre-pandemic thing. Headsets now mean hygiene, mean personalization, telework, any of us. Who is she? What's her profession? What does she do? What does she represent? Telework. Right. But let's think about it. What were we saying? This could be a religious service if we're going to an extreme. She might be preaching a sermon, or she might be an attorney doing a legal consultation. What else? Who else could she be? Clearly a doctor. You were talking about doctors before the pandemic. I'd like to think about how we leap over obstacles. For 5 years, I've been working on telemedicine, and in any of your countries, Colombia, Mexico, Canada, the question is, oh, what is the legal framework for medical consultations? We needed a pandemic for the legal framework to be irrelevant. Of course, it's evolving, but all organizations who saw legislation, existing laws, as an obstacle started doing remote consultations just like that. So the business model means that if people want it, it was a matter of simply offering it. And some people say she's a doctor. Some people say she's a teacher teaching children right now. So a lot of ideas out there. She could be doing any of these things we mentioned. She might be closing a sale. Patty says something really good. She says there are no boundaries. And this is an issue that's being debated now in this world. As you said, Patty, all the activities Pedro mentioned, there is no geographical separation anymore. Right. She went to the country and she's serving her patients via video conference. What happens if the doctor you want, I'm near Buenos Aires right now. What happens if my preferred doctor or the one recommended to me is in Bogota? Why travel there if my first visit can be remote? So what was work and what will it be? That's a question we all need to ask ourselves. Right, we need to talk about what it was, because that's what we know, and that's our frame of reference. That's what we have enough information about. What we're doing right now is going through a transition, but it's very important to understand what it will be. That's why we want to share with you the paper, The Future of Work, which is at the link at the bottom, because it talks about that quite a bit. But I'll let you go on for a bit longer. It's a very interesting conversation. Right. I heard Alonso's comment, and I think about this a lot. Alonso says, what did you learn during the pandemic that made you rethink something important in your own life? And Alonso, that is the point. I'm going to bring it back to this situation. It made me rethink whether or not I want to go to the office and for how long. How valuable was it before and how valuable is it now? Just to relate it to our session, we're talking about when you have a physical space to go to, you used to hang out with your entire team. Of course, that's useful. Was it necessary for everyone to go every day? More or less. But it limited you because if it was physical, it restricted who you could work with, of course. And this has made it obvious. So, what was work? Typically, and especially in Latin America, in some countries, there was a broader and more dynamic view of it. But for Latin America, work was a place. Of course, totally. Right. I'm going to work. I'm going. Right. Look at the person on the right and call him Jose, Juan, whatever you like, because we're going to talk about him a little bit later during our session. Right. Elena, I want to talk about something. Elena said, my office today made the decision to go work from home full time. And this is happening. This is happening. So from what it was, a place, even if it was a fancy place, but over the last 5 years, we worked with architects and teams designing open spaces, hangout rooms, and the pandemic, we're going to talk about this. The pandemic is making us redesign everything because work stopped being a place. Now it is an activity that needs to happen in a place that has been broadened digitally, a physical virtual space. So it doesn't matter where you are. And that's one of the things that we'd like to touch on. Work isn't a place, and it actually never was. Rather, it was more of a mental roadblock. In the end, it's what you do, but also who you do it with. And you're interacting with increasingly more people, but I think you changed the idea of what interaction is. We were used to this, as you see in the image, what was more traditional to be being close physically. Now we're making a transition and we need to rethink these interactions. There's a comment that I want to fish out at left. I didn't see the person's name, but we shouldn't stop thinking about safety or security. It's right on. But of course, that is absolutely true. But we'll go to what Pedro called interactions. The idea we want to talk about here with you, the idea we want to bring, is that all interactions are a meeting. It's been a while now since I've been working with Pedro in the market of ideas and cooperation, but when we started, the premise upon which work was based was I work with people who are next to me and I also need a call system. And that's fine. And if I have that, then we have everything we need. We don't need anything else. Now just stop for a second. I want to invite you to think about the fact that every interaction is a meeting. Now, why? Because what is your day-to-day life like? Are you with more than one person? Right now, during the pandemic, people are going to be remote because most of us can't even leave home. But we're sharing something. And when we come back, this won't change. You either have 2 or more people or an earthquake. The call system is no longer enough. We need to connect people and content, and that is a meeting. It's not a matter of connecting people. It's not a call, hey, Pedro, I'm giving you a call. If what we want to do is create work, if you see me looking over here, it's because I'm keeping an eye on the questions. But what we need to do is connect people and content. And we need to do it in such a way that is resilient over time. Just an example, when I started working with Pedro on the presentation, this was maybe 3 weeks ago, we wrote up our first draft, we created a workroom, we had a call, and so we started working asynchronously. And you can see it's a small project, deliver the presentation. This delivery is like a meeting that started and just continued, and it never ended. Now, the where was always irrelevant. Either one of us could have been anywhere. Seeing each other is key. So I think it's very clear that we need to connect people and content. And I want to talk for a while about seeing each other, because for a while we talked about, video, whether or not it was good and bad. And we're here to tell you that not having video is killing productivity. Because what video does is it gets rid of the possibility of multitasking. You are seeing us here. Clearly, Pedro and I are here with you 100%, no doubt. There's no doubt about it, right? Take a look. More than one of you has the phone. While you're listening to us, you're answering your email. You might come back to us. But what we're trying to say is that video is key for people because of what we all tend to do. Right now, we all work for different companies, and the idea that we're able to share content and synchronous or asynchronous flows confidentially and in a compliant fashion in our organizations. So once again, if you go down to the links at the bottom of the screen, you can take a look at that. So tools. The first tool we're going to talk about is machines. WebEx is the tool that allows us to do this. And what we're interested in is the information. Hit the link, but the concept we want to talk about here is that all interactions need to be a meeting and they need to connect us all, no matter where we are, what devices we're using, include everyone, but Pedro, there needs to be security.
Personas que ponen, sí, estoy de acuerdo, solo la interacción social, pero rescatemos el tema de nuestro atendí que dijo la seguridad.
Let's go back to what one of our attendees said about security. What happens with security when everyone's working from home? That's a question, and you're absolutely right. We cannot leave that up to chance. It's very relevant to this conversation because what we've seen is that there's been a complete transformation of how the map of resources of a company is organized. We were talking about the network, and we're from Cisco, but that doesn't mean we're always talking about a LAN network. We can be talking about our contacts, support organizations, employees, the systems, applications, all those elements that are part of the computer system. And the user who does the work, that's you, Yvonne, that's me, that's Pablo, that's all of us who are here. We have to fulfill our daily obligations, regardless of what's happening, whether it's raining or snowing or whatever is happening outside. We need to have a way to do it, even if you have to do it remotely. We're all doing it now, of course, because of the circumstances, but what could be better than bringing our whole office to our house? And it's easy to do. It's not some kind of overwhelming job. You just need a Wi-Fi point of access from your company in your house, connected to internet already with the security permanently there, so it's a secure network even in your house. And then you can add some software elements that will protect you. You have to protect yourself in 2 or 3 different and essential ways. First of all, we need to know that who is connecting is actually that employee who is trying to access the valuable resources of the company, whether that person is connecting from home with the network. There's that arrow that shows you how it has to go through this biometric authentication. It's not just the username and the password. 81% of security issues happen because of users and passwords being hacked. So we need to use fingerprints, facial recognition, a second method of authentication, such as a text message, just to ensure that it actually is this person. Secondly, we need to have a computer that is free of viruses, malware. It needs to be totally healthy and sound so that when it connects to that business, it is protecting. And well, we might as well be talking about COVID here, right? Talking about viruses. And we also need protection in case somebody is trying to hack into the computer. So there we have a sort of umbrella that protects us all. And then there's something else. You're connected to your company, you're protected, You need this protection, end-to-end protection that allows you to access applications, and you'll see it in the next slide, where client information, client data is, invoicing, all the essential data of a company is there. And this is gold. You cannot let that be exposed. And that's why we have a second point that's essential that we need to remember. We cannot allow ourselves to be vulnerable to cybercrime. And this is happening every second of the day. While I am speaking right now, millions and millions of computer attacks are happening. So it needs to be something that there's permanent protection. And I said before, remember the photo of the person we saw in the picture, Pedro, Juan, whatever his name is, he's not worrying whether somebody is trying to hack in. It has to happen automatically, this protection. Excuse me, I just thought that there was a good point that was made. Gerardo asked a good question. He says, basically, I haven't seen an easy to use solution for SMEs. Maybe you can make some comments about what's user-friendly or what's for big companies or small ones. Well, there's a key to this, Gerardo, and that's why you can click on this link too, where you can consult this information, and also you can start using these applications immediately. There's a free trial. There's no cost to them, and you can start testing out these technologies, and it's all from the ground. You don't have to install a server or anything physical. You just subscribe to a service and you can start using it, and you download it all from the website. And so we're saying that the user, again, the guy in the picture, Jose, he needs to connect to other places too, because he's not just going to use the company's apps all day long. He has to browse around, he has to navigate around the internet, and even there he needs to be protected. There has to be some sort of guardian that's keeping watch over him, making sure that Jose is visiting websites that are authentic, that there's no phishing, that there's no malware there, so that they protect him and all the resources of the company and all the users. So remember that this situation I'm describing to you here, and going back to your question on security, this is Jose multiplied by 5, 10, 50, 100, 1,000, however many employees are working for that company. They will all have exactly the same situation, and we need to have consistent protection and use policies and policies for access to information. They all need to be held to the same standards, and don't connect with your cell phone or whatever you need to do, so that we can guarantee that those interactions, when we're holding meetings, when we're having one-to-one calls or group calls, it's also a secure interaction. When we show you the next animation, you'll see that all those collaboration interactions that are taking place, in this case through a technology such as WebEx, require a screening and a management process. And this is where the big question comes up. And this also helps us to respond to what Gerardo was bringing up. Who, and small and medium-sized enterprises are not the only ones, all of them can ask themselves, who has the capacity in real time to monitor every time there's a new virus or a new malware, and then update each one of the users of all the access points? It's impossible for a human being to do all that. We need artificial intelligence and automation for that. We have a monitoring service that's private. It's called Talos under Cisco, which automatically monitors everything that is circulating on the internet, detecting anomalies, detecting patterns, anomalous content patterns, and injecting those security updates automatically to everyone who is connected from these companies. Why? Because it has to be made simple, not just for the user in the photo, but for all people like him and all the people who are managing all this technology, we have to make it easy for them to do their work. I talked about the platform on the network. We all need to be connected, and that's a lot of access points and a lot of people. Well, you're touching upon the point that we were trying to reach. When everybody spreads out, keeping security up is complex. We mentioned some things about the clouds. It's easy for companies of all sizes use it. But first you talked about connectivity. So the third lesson that we wanted to discuss has to do with the web. That's the platform. So can you tell us a little bit more about the evolution you see here in terms of the web and where you see it going? Yes, there's something that is a very basic concept in this whole conversation. Everything is being connected, and there are more and more connections happening every day. I'm not hearing anybody saying, I'm going to disconnect from the internet. Maybe some people do as a personal choice, but nobody's saying, really, I want nothing to do with the internet. On the contrary, we're connecting more and more devices to the internet, and not just for work. This is also for other purposes, sensors, controllers. You can't imagine the number of devices in your house that actually are connected to the internet. Maybe you've even forgotten about it, but they're there. So the web is changing. It's not like before where there was an administrator, he controlled the users' computers, points of access, applications, servers, and that person was in a building, in a campus, with several buildings that were interconnected, but all within a business environment. What's happening? There are a lot of people now on the web who are working from home, and that was a question from Yvonne. Now that people are home, what do we do about security? And that's part of the answer that I was still owing to you, and I was waiting till we got here to answer it. We need to evolve in such a way that we can still do all that administration and management, but from any point, from any device, from any communications device, and now also in people's homes. This map that you see on the left, you see some location names here, Palermo, Belgrano. This is a real image from a monitored network, and all these dots are employees who are connected working from home. So the network manager can see this and understand use patterns and have policies such that these employees can have secure, trustworthy, and robust access to the data they need. And then there's another micro world, so to speak, or another issue to resolve, because this network is interconnected through the web, and there's a competition for resources. Kids are doing their homework, some people are taking virtual classes, some in the family are consuming some, news or some other internet content, or they're watching a movie or listening to music. Excuse me, real life example. At this time in my home, I have someone, my son, who's on vacation. So he's using PlayStation and my wife is taking a course. So all this is happening at the same time. But I can't tell them, hey, stop being connected. I have to work. We have to find a way that we can all do it. Well, I have 3 kids here, so I have the same situation. My daughter's watching something on Netflix. My son is doing something else on the internet, and I'm not going to pop out of the door and tell them that they have to disconnect. So we need to manage that as well from a corporate perspective. As an administrator who manages all these connections can define general use policies that apply to everyone, but also they can give users a certain level of autonomy such that within their house at that network point, as I was saying in the beginning, it's managed by the company so that it's safe, but there's a certain level of autonomy within that home as to how they want to configure it. And they can do, for example, something about streaming only after 5 p.m. when all homework has been done, all work has been done. Then after that, you can watch your movies, or I can also determine what priorities the bandwidth will have. And that's why Pablo's video is streaming constantly, and mine is because it's being managed by that huge network that we are referring to. And again, an important thing, I don't want us to stray away from the concept of now and tomorrow. Celeste asked a question in the chat a few minutes ago, and that person said there's nothing like personal interaction, nothing will replace it. At some point, we have to hug each other again. I've heard that comment too. All of that is important, yes. So this new network can take care of those details. As you see on the right, there is what we call a heat map. This is a real office. And this new network has the ability with these antenna and access points for connectivity on all floors. It has the ability to sense and detect where people are moving because you all have a device with you, a radio. Some people don't know they're carrying it, but here it is. It's broadcasting a frequency all the time. So we can detect where people are, and where you see those red dots, it means that there is a concentration, perhaps a dangerous concentration of people where we would recommend that they not congregate there at this time of COVID. So for some organizations, they still need to define what these policies will be. But in any case, we can have technologies that will help us take care of all of this. And again, the question is, Pablo, what human being is able to control all of this manually? You can't do it. So it needs to be made easier, more user-friendly. So how can we do this in technology? How can we make it simple? And we've been talking about that ever since we started talking about security. Before we continue, I want to make a side comment here. I can't believe what's going on in the chat and the Q&A. It's really fascinating. A comment from Francisco. He says, this is leaving out a whole age group. Well, Francisco, I'm not going to tell you what my age is, but I can tell you that I have not been left out. The point is, what's happening again is that people who thought they would never change are changing, and that's fascinating. And more than a generational change, I think there's been a change in attitude, because sometimes we think that age means that you have to be reluctant to adopt technology, but it's not the case, and the pandemic has shown us that. And we only have 10 minutes left, so I want to summarize this a little bit. Francisco, the key here is for security, for everything to be as intuitive as possible. What are we doing at Cisco? And just to partially respond to someone who said, I want to know what difference there is between Zoom and what you're talking about. This is not a marketing presentation. We can get in touch separately to talk about specific products and compare. But here we just want to give you some tips and some ideas that are much more general, much broader. If you have a tool, you can use it immediately without having to be a techie, without having to be an expert. And if you want to use it with different platforms, you understand. If you see your WebEx icon, you can use it, no matter what device it is. Yes, go ahead. I saw a message here that I loved. And I want to emphasize it because it really helps us see that perspective that shows us that this isn't just for office workers. It's a very nice message here about the ability, and they're talking about their company, they're promoting it. about improving agricultural processes through technology. This is a very interesting field. And there's a word that sometimes I say it in these meetings, but I'm not trying to be a lecturer. I'm using it very humbly, and it's the word innovation. The word innovation, what it really means is simply a new way of doing things to obtain a certain benefit. And in every aspect of life, if I can do something differently or better, it's great. And the only thing technology does is to accelerate or make that process more replicable or less expensive. Because that's innovation too, allowing us to do things many more times. And there's technology for fertilization, for irrigation, and there's simply messages about this that go to the person who's managing this. So this is a great innovation. And I like that message because it's a very nice example of how technology can help us improve our processes. And I want to go back to another point, and then we'll go back to our last 10 minutes. What happens when people are deaf? That was a question. And that's something that the pandemic has shown a light on. We say that working remotely has made us more inclusive. We've discovered that through the use of video and from our homes, all of us, even deaf people, can work because they have access to sign language. And there are also devices that they can use to complement their communications, or people who have mobility issues. With the pandemic, we discovered that you don't have to move really, you don't have to go to the office. So of course we can be more inclusive, and that's very important. And I want to segue into another topic based on a comment I also saw. Somebody said that education always needs to be in person. I understand the rationale behind that statement, that when we talk about the future, I also want to talk about inclusion. This morning we were talking about a project that, thanks to the pandemic and to the use of WebEx, this is in Colombia, a place that you're very familiar with, we can reach neighborhoods where nobody wanted to children of criminals, and nobody was brave enough to go in there, but now they can get education remotely. So traditional education will always be there with physical presence, but this is also a new model for activity. And there was a key element here, and it was flexibility and simplicity. When we get to this point, Pedro and participants, many people say, well, I know what you're talking about, but then what is WebEx really? And somebody said, and I have the comment here, interaction is great, but what about content? And I want to bring these two questions together. This is WebEx. What we are doing, who cares what the brand is, Jitsi, Zoom, whatever, that's what it is. It's a technology that has existed for years. But remember, every interaction is a meeting, and WebEx is the platform that makes this possible. Just a question. So WebEx is not an app. It's more than an app. WebEx is consumed through an app. It's configurable, it's modular, but what it is, it's a platform on the cloud that provides all interactive services, messaging, calls, security. Somebody said, how do I guarantee compliance? WebEx, and this differentiates it from all other options in the world, has the highest compliance in the world. The most secure organizations in the world use it, and it can be used from any device through an app, or there can be a dedicated device. Also, if there's a meeting, can there be telephony? WebEx calling in Latin America offers telephone services, or also this device. What is a WebEx headset for? It can be managed from the cloud itself, the telephone, the computer, the app, the meeting room, the devices that count the number of people in the room through the use of the camera. And all this can be managed from the same place. For you who develop apps or who develop extensions for products, WebEx is an infinitely expandable platform. But to the point of this meeting, what's important is that it helps generate that paradigm that all conversations are meetings that can be secure. And somebody was asking, how do you buy it? How much does it cost? Can we get it for free? Yes, of course, you can use it for free. But if you want to use it for a business that needs a broader array of services, then you need a subscription. The idea is for you to see the simplicity that we are referring to. I'm very careful about the time. I know we have a very short amount of time left. Well, I have a comment here. There are questions that I just find very interesting. Somebody's saying, you cannot do open heart surgery remotely. That's just not possible. And on December 6, 2019, India, a heart operation took place with a surgeon's support who was miles away. We just need to think about barriers that we impose on ourselves. There are always new ways to do things. We need to be open-minded in these conversations. We need to just think, how can we do this differently or better? And the technology will be there. Technology, Pedro, has led us to a phrase a friend of mine always uses. The word impossible is just out. We don't use it anymore. And for that, we need to manage this change and you have the link down at the bottom there, because there's a lot about change management there. We see entire teams that moved. Their bosses had said, oh, they would never agree to remote work. But the technology was always there. That was the easy part. And this is our last lesson, might as well be the first one, given how important it is. The technology is the easy part. The human aspect, changing the mindset of teams, that is the more difficult part. People in technology like us and many who talk to us, we always focus on the device, but human resources is the key to all of these transformations. Regarding the concept of innovation, don't forget that innovation is just a new way to do things. But when I discover how to do them, now that I know how to do it in a different way, technology allows me to have it be less expensive, more replicable, easier. Yes, for Christian, who said, what was lesson number 4? You're right. 4 was flexibility and simplicity. And now we're talking about the 5th one, and we're about to conclude. The technological transformation is the simple part. If it's not supported, if it doesn't come top down, it doesn't work. IT doesn't put the pressure on the CEO. The top level of the company needs to be convinced, whether it's education, whether it's health or manufacturing. At the top levels of the company, there needs to be this conviction. That's when technology can come in. I think it was Karina who said, the management of human resources is key. Yes, processes and culture are the keys in a company. So we always say, how do we like to conclude our meetings? We like to talk about what we're going to do tomorrow. We've talked for 40 minutes. Our heads are about to explode. It's been a fabulous event. We've been here for a few days. What are we going to do tomorrow? How do we start? Where do we start? Well, perhaps remember that what is coming does not equal what happened in the past. It's not a straight line from what came before to what comes after. If you think about it that way, you've made a mistake. So the first thing we would say is all interactions are meetings. When you think about your business process or your client care, all interactions are meetings. Where they happen is irrelevant. Video is key. Pablo, from the perspective of how to think about it culturally as organizations, we need to be flexible. We need to think differently, open up our doors and our minds to new ideas, new ways of doing things in general. We need to seek the greater good. In a conversation recently, I heard the question, what do you recommend to entrepreneurs with a pandemic on how to maintain their businesses? And I said, my answer is very simple. First, think about the other person. Don't think about yourself. Think about your client. Think about how you can bring that benefit closer to your client, because that person is also going through a lot and is also perhaps feeling isolated. And if we think about that, if all of us think that way, we will do much better. And then security as well, of course. We really have to be obsessive, or that's an understatement. Yes, it is completely essential. And just in closing, it's okay to fail. Don't worry about failing. If you make the mistake quickly, then it's not a mistake. It's a lesson learned. The largest group of collaboration users is here. You can scan it and you have it in some of the slides as well. Join this group. The QR code is there on the screen because we have more questions than answers today, more intention to try something, and there's no dogmatic answer. We're here to help you. And now we give back the floor to Itzel, who has some important messages. Goodbye from both of us. We leave you with all our contact information. Pablo and I, thank you very much. This has been a wonderful interaction, so warm. Yes, I really want to continue reading all the messages. It's truly been a pleasure. Thank you from ourselves on behalf of Cisco. Thank you, Itzel, and to the whole O2LAC team. This has been wonderful, and back to you. Thank you very much, Pedro and Pablo. We've enjoyed this meeting immensely. And yes, we've been very proud of our audience with Connect Americas and O2LAC. They're very positive, very interactive. They make great comments, but also your presentation generated these very interesting comments. So thank you very much for that. And to our audience, before we say goodbye, we wanted to simply convey this message of thanks to you after these 8 days. And we were so anxious to see what the final balance would be and the final impact of what we've done. And we are so happy that we have concluded. Again, thank you to our audience, our familiar participants and users of Connect Americas or O2LAC participants as well. Thank you for being with us again in this new virtual adventure. I hope we've provided you with new ideas and possibilities for new business connections. And for those of you who are with us for the first time or who are just exploring Connect Americas, welcome. Our objective is to offer you content, contacts, and opportunities to help you export more and better. Make sure you create your account on connectamericas.com so you can be kept informed of everything that's happened, especially now that we're so focused on helping out our SMEs during this pandemic. And thank you to our partners as well. They contributed time and resources for this new edition of O2LAC. Cisco, of course, did a wonderful job closing out. Thank you to Israel, Salesforce, Neil Group. Thank you for your support for this event. And during these 8 days, you've seen my face and Manuela's face on some of the sessions, but really for all of this to happen so smoothly, it was really about 30 people working on different aspects of coordination. So I'll give the floor now to Gerardo Funes, coordinator of this event, and he'll tell you a little bit more about that.
Thank you very much, Itzel, thank you so much. I'd like to thank Pedro and Pablo again for today's phenomenal session. I'm sure that it was extremely useful to our audience today. Thanks to the over 70 panelists who gave us their time and their insights to share with you. And I would just like to thank our team members. Thank you so much for your dedication, the long hours, your enthusiasm, for such attention to detail for every aspect of this event. Jorge, Graciela, Rodrigo, there's so many people out there who were behind the event. When we started to organize this virtual event, we didn't know what to expect, how it would go, how to make sure that our audience and our speakers would have an experience as similar as possible to the experience you normally get during our face-to-face events. So I think what we were able to understand is it wasn't a matter of duplicating the experience. We needed to create a new experience using technology and using the energy and the willingness to cooperate that is a trait of all Connect America's users and Outsource to O2LAC's audience. We've been so successful, but we can't wait for a face-to-face meeting next time. We had to postpone so many of the face-to-face meetings we had planned for 2020 and 2021. So we hope that we get to see you again soon so that we get to chat in the hallways and speak to you, to panelists, activists, our audience, and have a little fun too. So we will keep you posted as far as when we'll see each other again. Thank you for being with us over these 8 days, and I'll give the floor back to Itzel, and we'll see you very soon. Thank you, Gerardo. So with that, even though it's so clear to us that a large part of the value that was shared so generously by our speakers and cooperators cannot be measured, we would like to leave you with the presentation to give you some of the most important statistics about this event and some credits for our team members, without whom none of this would have been possible. So thanks a million once again, and we'll see you during the next version of Outsource to O2LAC, whether it's virtual, face-to-face, or a hybrid.